The fluorescent lights flickered above as David walked into the waiting room of Dr. Collins' clinic. A soft hum of the overhead vents filled the silence, punctuated by the distant sounds of muffled voices. He glanced at the clock on the wall, 3 p.m. His wife, Sarah, was supposed to be done with her appointment by now. A knot twisted in his stomach. She had been distant lately, their conversations reduced to surface-level exchanges about bills and groceries. "Hey, David," the receptionist called, snapping him out of his thoughts. "What brings you here?" "Just checking in on Sarah." "She's been in the exam room for a while," he replied, forcing a smile. "Yeah, she's been in there a bit longer than usual. You know how Dr. Collins is, always chatting." "I'll check on her," the receptionist said, her tone light and friendly. David nodded, but a sense of unease settled deeper within him. He paced the room, glancing at the magazines spread across the coffee table, their pages dog-eared and outdated. The hum of the clinic faded as his thoughts spiraled. What if she's really ill? What if? The possibilities gnawed at him, but he shook his head, dismissing the worst-case scenarios. A few moments later, the receptionist returned, her expression shifting slightly. David, I think you should go in. They've been in there for quite a while." "Thanks," he said, his voice tense. He pushed through the door, the cool air of the exam room hitting him like a wave. "Sarah," he called, stepping inside. The sight that met him froze him in his tracks. Sarah lay back on the examination table, her blouse slightly askew and her hair a tousled mess. Dr. Collins stood beside her, his hands on her waist, whispering something that David couldn't quite catch. "David!" Sarah gasped, her eyes wide with shock. "Damn it!" David shouted, his heart pounding in his chest like a drum. "What the hell is going on here?" Dr. Collins straightened, his face pale. "I can explain." "Don't." David interrupted, stepping forward, fists clenched at his sides. "You think I care about your excuses? This is my wife." "David, please," Sarah pleaded, her voice shaking. "It's not what it looks like." "Not what it looks like?" David laughed bitterly, the sound harsh in the sterile room. "I'd say it looks like you're having an affair with my family doctor." "Stop yelling," Dr. Collins said, his voice firm but quaking slightly. "This isn't the time for—" "Not the time?" David's voice rose. "You're sleeping with my wife in your clinic. When is the right time for this?" Sarah sat up, trying to adjust her blouse. "David, listen to me. It happened once, and I regret it. I was confused and—" "Confused?" David echoed, his heart racing. "Confused enough to betray me? To betray our vows?" "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "You have to believe me." "Believe you?" David's voice cracked. "You expect me to believe that? After everything we've built together?" The weight of betrayal hung heavy in the air, and David felt like he was suffocating. He turned to Dr. Collins, his eyes narrowing. "And you, how could you do this? You're supposed to help people, not destroy families." Dr. Collins looked down, his face flushing with shame. "I didn't plan for this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you." "Too late for that, isn't it?" David spat. "You think this is some kind of game?" Sarah stood, tears streaming down her cheeks. "David, please. I love you. This was a mistake, a stupid mistake." "A mistake?" David stepped back, shaking his head in disbelief. "This wasn't a mistake, Sarah. This was a choice." "David, don't," Sarah reached for him, but he recoiled, as if her touch burned. "Don't what? Don't feel betrayed? Don't feel like a fool?" He turned away, running a hand through his hair, trying to steady his racing thoughts. Just give me time to explain," she begged, her voice trembling. "I'm not the person you think I am." "You're not the person I thought you were," he replied coldly, glancing back at her. "You've been hiding something from me." This is who you really are. David. Dr. Collins interjected, desperate. You can't just walk away. We can talk about this. No. I'm done talking. David stormed out of the exam room, the door slamming behind him. Each step felt heavier than the last, his heart shattering with every beat. Outside, the receptionist looked up, concern etched on her face. Is everything okay? Just fine, David muttered, his voice strained. He pushed through the clinic door, the cool air hitting him like a slap. The parking lot felt suffocating as David leaned against his car, trying to process what had just happened. His mind raced with images of Sarah and Dr. Collins, their laughter echoing in his ears. How could she? He fumbled for his phone, scrolling through his contacts until he found Jake, his best friend. He needed to talk, needed to vent. Hey, man, Jake answered, the sound of a bustling bar in the background. What's up? Can you meet me? It's urgent, David said, his voice tight. Sure, where? Just, anywhere. I'll drive. 20 minutes later, they sat at a small table in a dimly lit bar, the atmosphere thick with laughter and clinking glasses. David stared into his drink, the amber liquid swirling like his thoughts. Talk to me, Jake said, leaning forward. What's going on? David took a deep breath, the weight of his words heavy on his tongue. I caught Sarah, with Dr. Collins. No way. Are you serious? Jake's eyes widened. Yeah, in his clinic, David replied, his voice barely above a whisper. They were together. Damn. I'm so sorry, man. Jake leaned back, processing the information. What are you going to do? I don't know. I just feel so betrayed, David admitted, his heart aching. I thought we had something real, something solid. But now? You need to confront her, Jake said firmly. You can't let this slide. You deserve answers. Answers? David scoffed, shaking his head. What kind of answers can she give me? I love you, but I also love him. Maybe not that harsh, but you need to talk it out. Decide if you want to fight for your marriage or walk away, Jake said. David nodded slowly, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. I don't know if I can trust her again. Trust is everything, man. You've got to figure out what you want. It's your life, Jake replied. I just don't want to feel like this anymore, David said, his voice cracking. Let's get another round, Jake suggested, raising his glass. You can drown your sorrows for a bit. They clinked glasses, but the laughter around them felt distant, as if it belonged to another world. David's mind was still reeling, the betrayal echoing relentlessly. Days turned into weeks, and the pain of Sarah's betrayal lingered like an open wound. David spent his nights questioning everything about their relationship, the memories tainted by doubt. One evening, as he sat on the couch, the weight of loneliness crashing down on him, Sarah walked in, her expression cautious. David, can we talk? He looked up, an icy edge to his gaze. What's left to say? Please, she begged, her voice trembling. I know I messed up, but I want to fix this. Fix it, he echoed, disbelief coloring his tone. You think it's that easy? David, I've been going to therapy. I'm trying to understand why I did what I did, she said, tears shining in her eyes. I want us back. I want to fight for our marriage. Fight? David laughed bitterly. You think saying you're sorry makes everything better? You broke my trust, Sarah. I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again. I know. And I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice cracking. But I love you. I've always loved you. David stood, pacing the room, his emotions a storm. Love isn't enough when you've shattered everything we built. Please, just give me a chance, she pleaded, reaching for him. He stepped back, shaking his head. You had your chance, Sarah. You threw it away. David, she cried, desperation lacing her voice. I was lost. I didn't know how to talk to you, how to express my feelings. But I want to change that. Change? He turned to face her, the hurt in his eyes raw and exposed. How can I believe anything you say? Because I'm willing to do whatever it takes, she said, her voice steadying. I'll go to counseling, I'll be transparent. Just, don't walk away. David ran a hand through his hair, the conflict raging within him. I need time, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Time? Sarah echoed, hope flickering in her eyes. I can do that. I'll wait for you. He shook his head, a mixture of frustration and sorrow flooding his chest. I don't want to hurt you, but I don't know if I can forgive you. Just promise me you'll think about it, she said, her voice small. He nodded slowly, watching as she walked away, her silhouette fading into the hallway. The ache in his heart felt insurmountable. As days turned into a month, David grappled with his emotions, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He spent hours at work, trying to drown out the memories, but they lingered like shadows in the corners of his mind. One evening, as he sat at the kitchen table, staring at the untouched meal Sarah had prepared, the door creaked open. She walked in, her eyes searching his. Hey, she said softly, her voice tentative. Hey, David replied, his heart heavy. Can we talk? She asked, her expression earnest. He nodded, bracing himself for the conversation that had been looming. I've been thinking, she began, her hands fidgeting on the table. About us, our marriage. I know I messed up, but I want to make it right. I want to rebuild what we had. Rebuild? David echoed, his voice laced with skepticism. It's not that simple, Sarah. Trust doesn't just come back. I know. But I'm willing to put in the work. I've started seeing a therapist, and I want to learn how to communicate better. I don't want to lose you, she said, her voice steady. What if I can't forgive you? David asked, his heart racing. Then I'll accept it, she replied, her gaze unwavering. But I need you to know that I'm committed to changing. I'll do whatever it takes. David felt the weight of her words, the sincerity behind them. But the scars of betrayal still throbbed, a constant reminder of the pain. I need time to think, he said finally, his voice hoarse. Take all the time you need, she said softly, tears glistening in her eyes. I'll be here, waiting. As she walked away, David felt a mix of relief and sorrow wash over him. The decision loomed ahead, a crossroads that would shape the rest of their lives. Weeks passed, and David found himself at a tipping point, the weight of indecision pressing down on him. He spent countless nights contemplating, wrestling with his emotions. One evening, as he sat on the couch, his phone buzzed with a message from Jake. Let's meet. I have something to tell you. David felt a flicker of curiosity. He agreed, and soon found himself in the same bar, the familiar hum of laughter surrounding him. Hey, man, Jake greeted, sliding into the booth across from him. Hey, David replied, his heart racing. What's up? I found something out, Jake said, his expression serious. About Sarah. What do you mean? David's stomach dropped. I was talking to a mutual friend, and apparently, she's been seeing Dr. Collins again, Jake said, his voice low. What? David's heart raced, anger boiling within him. She told me she was done with him. That's what I thought too, but she's been sneaking around, Jake said, his tone grave. I thought you deserved to know. David felt the world tilt beneath him, the betrayal slicing deeper than before. I can't believe this, he muttered, his voice thick with rage. I'm so sorry, man, Jake said, reaching out a hand. What are you going to do? The anger coursed through David like wildfire, igniting a need for revenge. I'm going to confront her. This ends now. That evening, David returned home, his heart pounding with determination. He found Sarah in the living room, her expression brightening when she saw him. David. You're home early, she said, stepping forward. "Sit down," he commanded, his voice low and steady. Her smile faltered, confusion flickering in her eyes. "What's wrong? Don't play games with me, Sarah." "I know you've been seeing Dr. Collins again," he said, his tone sharp. Her face paled, and she opened her mouth to protest. "Save it," he interrupted, anger surging. "I can't believe you'd betray me again. After everything we've been through, you still chose him? David, please." "It's not what you think," she cried, her voice rising in panic. "Not what I think?" He shook his head, disbelief coursing through him. "You're a liar. You said you wanted to fix this, but you just went back to the same man who broke us." "I didn't mean to. I was confused, and I thought maybe I could work it out, but I promise it's over," she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "Over?" he echoed, his heart hardening. "How can I believe anything you say?" "Because I love you. I was scared, and I thought." "Thought what? That I wouldn't find out?" He stepped back, his heart aching. "You've hurt me too many times. David, please. I want you in my life. I'll do anything, you can't just throw this away," she cried, desperation seeping into her voice. "Throw what away? A lie? A betrayal?" he shouted, his voice echoing in the silence of the room. "I deserve better than this. Please, I'll change. Just give me another chance," she begged, reaching for him. He stepped back, shaking his head. "You're not the person I thought you were, Sarah. I can't do this anymore." "David," she cried, her voice breaking. "Don't walk away." He turned, the pain in his chest almost unbearable. "I'm done. You made your choice." As he walked out the door, the weight of finality settled over him. The decision was made, the betrayal etched into his heart. Days turned into weeks, and the ache of loss lingered, but David found solace in the clarity of his choice. He focused on rebuilding his life, rediscovering who he was outside of their marriage. One evening, as he sat in a coffee shop, lost in thought, his phone buzzed with a message from Jake. "Let's meet. I have something to share." Curiosity piqued, David agreed, and soon found himself in the same bar where they had shared their first conversation about Sarah. "Hey," Jake greeted, sliding into the booth. "Hey," David replied, a sense of anticipation building. "I've been talking to some of our friends, and they've been really supportive of you," Jake said. "They want to help you move on." "Thanks, but I'm all right," David replied, a hint of reluctance in his voice. "Seriously, man. You deserve happiness. You shouldn't have to go through this alone," Jake said, concern etched on his face. David nodded, the ache in his heart still raw but less consuming. "I appreciate it. I'm just trying to figure things out." "Good. Just remember, you're not alone in this," Jake said, reaching out to clasp David's shoulder. As the night wore on, David felt a sense of hope stirring within him. The wounds would take time to heal, but he knew he was on the path to rediscovering himself. Weeks turned into months, and as summer faded into fall, David embraced the changes in his life. He found new hobbies, reconnected with old friends, and began to heal. One evening, as he sat on his porch, watching the sunset, a sense of peace filled him. He had faced the storm of betrayal and emerged stronger. His phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. "I miss you. I hope you're doing okay." He stared at the screen, contemplating the weight of her words. "I'm moving on, Sarah. I hope you can too." The finality of his decision settled over him, but he felt lighter, unburdened by the past. He had found clarity in the chaos, and as he watched the sun dip below the horizon, he knew that brighter days lay ahead. In the end, David realized that sometimes, the hardest decisions lead to the most profound growth. The betrayal had changed him, but it also opened his eyes to the possibility of new beginnings. And with each passing day, he found strength in his journey, learning to embrace the beauty of letting go.